Good afternoon. We'd like to welcome you to week 5 of PQP2 at Lakehead University. We would also like to acknowledge that we are gathered on the traditional territory of Animkewajau, Fort William First Nation, and we're looking forward to sharing a little bit about what we've been reading over the past week and what we have to look forward to for the remainder of this week.
Well, yes, and good afternoon, and thanks for everyone's patience. As I mentioned in one of my two courses, it is EQAO week, and I think that's for everybody, 2 weeks in the system if you are working in a provincially funded school in Ontario. It is a very busy time, so I appreciate everyone's patience and giving us a few moments to get ourselves gathered and organized.
And I've been traveling, doing a new teacher performance appraisals because it's kind of that year end where you're doing your second performance appraisals. So I've been on the road, sometimes without internet, sometimes without phone, but glad to be back again.
So in part 2, this last session in Module 4, we got a chance to look at finance, and as we said in the intro, it is a little dry, and there were some comments to that, but I think most of you saw the real interest and real need in getting to know that as a principal. It's important to understand where those how the funding is enveloped in grants, so that you understand where things are coming from. Also, someone mentioned a really good comment in one of my posts, and that was, it seems sometimes probably to outsiders, particularly staff members, that when you're making budget decisions, they might be arbitrary or they might be just a need to say no. If you have a really clear understanding of how things are funded through the ministry grants and the ministry allotments, then you have an opportunity also to open that up to some transparency with your staff, which builds that trust and starts to build those relationships again around that you are doing things in the best interest and you're using the resources that we do have that are allocated in the way that they're meant to be allocated. So it's a good exercise. It's important to know. I know a lot of people discuss too the responsibility around budget, and I think many people didn't realize until talking. Some of you talked with your administrators or colleagues that you knew or folks or resources to find out just how difficult managing all those financial resources are, but it's something you are ultimately responsible for the money within the schools.
And one of the comments that came up several times in ours was really the importance of aligning your school priorities with your money. And I guess the phrase, you really put your money where you decide it's important. And I say you as in you, but really I mean you as in the whole school community. And one of the comments someone made, they wondered how the community would have a say into all of this. And in the fall and in the spring, when I looked at budgeting for the year that I was in and the year moving forward, when I met with school council, I just didn't budget the school council money with the school council. I actually gave them a real honest and open, transparent look and input into the school priorities, because as parents, they have different priorities perhaps than the principal might, or the kindergarten teachers might, or the EAs might, or all the different employee groups that you might all have different priorities. So it's a matter of actually meeting with every single stakeholder group and learning and listening to what their priorities are, and then from there moving forward with the money that you actually have. And for me, I guess the big underlying piece was always around students. So what do students need? And what do we think, after hearing from everybody, will be creating the most benefit to the students? And that's typically where we put our finances.
Right. You also had an opportunity to look at some data, and going into Module 5, I know some of you already gotten there, and so you're looking at data design and instruction. Many of you chose EQAO scores, some TEMIS scores, there was some obviously OSSLT. One of the things I wanted to note about data, and leading into Module 5 and the data-informed, instructional data-informed improvement planning, just reading a professional resource, again, sort of perusing it, and it's Regie Routman's Read, Write, and Learn. And just a reminder from her and others that when you are trying to build a sense of urgency with your staff and agency and owning change, clearly we recognize, if you talk about the province, that there's a need in math to make some changes, and we've had to look very critically at the data. We've had to pull it apart. We've had to see what it looks like, how it affects our students, and then where our needs are, and then how we were going to best address them. And you need to make that data picture explicit for your staff. And the reason is that helps to build in them the sense of urgency that they need to change, so then they become invested learners in that collaborative inquiry, collaborative change piece. And then next steps, they also gain agency, so they own what they're doing. So you're looking for both of those as you're building staff change, particularly if you're coming to a new building. But lots of times you have to show the data, you have to make the link to student achievement and the link to your students explicit, and that is the piece or the key that'll help get those folks engaged and understanding that we need the change, and then that means they'll invest the time, hopefully, in the professional learning piece. So it's just a good reminder about how important data is, and mining the data so that it's purposeful, and that it is explicit and that it's related to student achievement within your school. That's really, really important because data for data's sake really doesn't tell us the whole story, but when we appropriately pull it apart and mine it, and I saw lots of folks talking about how they, amongst their staffs, have been pulling apart even EQAO questions and looking about how it strands, how it crosses the strands as thinking, communication, application, knowledge and understanding, and looking at where their students were falling down in which pieces. That's the kind of data and data analysis that's going to get your staff engaged and really having a discussion about how we improve teaching practices to move things forward.
And that's sort of been a theme that we've seen in modules 3, 4, and now 5. So that's a really important part around leading your school achievement. We do ask you to think about a story. So we're asking you in this module to think about a time when, kind of like if you're going in for an interview, and I know a few of you had just had interviews for vice principal or principal positions. Some of you have relocated and are having teacher interviews right now. But really we want you to think about a personal story of leadership, about a time when you demonstrated leadership. And so we're thinking about this particular submodule as like an interview question. So if you can think about it and frame it, give it a title, talk about your role, talk about the situation, talk about how you had impact, talk about challenges that you might have had and what you learned as you worked through that, and hopefully you're able to bring us to a positive outcome. If you weren't able to get to a positive outcome when you're in a job interview, it's really important to think about what did you learn and how would you have moved that differently. But honestly, I would advise you, if you can't give a story about a positive outcome, I would find another story. Because typically your employers are looking for the fact that you can have a win-win-win on how many people are involved. But really that's a kind of a key piece that you likely will come across in interviews. And talk about it, I have, not I will. Okay, so that is the week coming up, and we look forward to reading more about your practicums. Really interesting. I've been reading through them with a really detailed eye for myself and giving a little bit of feedback to them, but we look forward to seeing the rest of them.
Okay.
Have a good week.
Thank you.